Hello and welcome to the second part of a concluding episode on what is the agenda, my agenda for the 2020 Era Holy Ecclesia Church. First thing we're going to talk about is strategically positioning all congregations and parishes in their local marketplace, so to speak. Now, I am going to be drawing upon about a decade of my work in designing, pulling together, and managing a for-profit consulting company called the Fulcrum Group. And we did strategic positioning work for a whole variety of businesses, hospitals, nonprofit organizations, as well as churches. The first part of the whole concept of strategically positioning congregations and parishes in their what I'm calling marketplace is the whole idea of jumping the curve, jumping the S-curves without major hurdles to overcome, as you can see in the graphic, or stretch goals to achieve. Almost all organizations and products eventually stagnate and spiral downward. And in my view, that includes local parishes and congregations. The whole task of positioning a church in its marketplace neighborhood, in my view, has to do with finding the proprietary ground. As you see in the graphic here, it is a combination of what are the current and emerging, I call it customer, that is potential believers, potential members, and the societal needs. That's one component of finding the congregation's unique proprietary ground. On the left is you build on the institutional character, the history, but also the beliefs and values of that parish or that congregation. And yes, you can echo the denomination, but the crucial issue is, what does this Anglican parish or Roman Catholic parish or Lutheran congregation or Baptist or Methodist or what have you, what are their values and what's their institutional history and what are their beliefs that they want to bring into the marketplace, competing for people's potential allegiance and membership. That's a part of trying to find the brand identity as well as the proprietary ground of that congregation. Now, on the right side, what are the organizational core and distinctive competencies? Does it excel at preaching, outreach, evangelism, service to the community, music, education? How does it all put it all together? It's very difficult to be all things to all people. Good organizations make a choice of what are their core competencies, and they build on those core competencies, especially those that are distinctive and not duplicated by competitors within your particular marketplace. Finally, on the bottom, adding to the proprietary ground, what are the organization's competitive advantages? What are they better at than the competing potential claims on membership of people who are currently either lapsed or unchurched in the marketplace? And that's what I am suggesting for congregations to find their own strategic proprietary ground in their unique local marketplace. As we look forward then, the next component of my agenda for the 2020 Era Holy Ecclesia Church is to what I cryptically call consolidate and stay light. And that is, assume that this is a metropolitan area. It could be a very large one, or it could be a medium-sized one, or even a relatively small size. Now, such an era, and we're just using this graphic as an example, has a number of local parishes scattered around. And many of them are highly costly to operate in the sense of A, to upkeep the property, B, to pay for staff, and see what are the opportunity costs. In other words, that property may be extremely valuable. So they're sitting on a piece of property while they're struggling just to keep the doors open. Rather than tugs at the heart with allegiance, the 2020 era agenda for the church, in my view, is to make those hard decisions. And they have to be made at the superintendent level or the diocesan level or the synod level, whatever the jurisdictional polity of your denomination is. So the first part then is to consolidate and then to stay light. Rather than building new facilities, lease property for 5 or maybe at most 10 years in a shopping center or something. Stay light, consolidate. That's my message for the 2020 era Holy Ecclesia Church. Now, the second key part of consolidating and staying light, however, are a heavy emphasis on what I call discipleship groups. You can see people of all different kinds and shapes and colors represented in this logo, and I call it an opt-out or opt-in set of discipleship groups. In other words, everybody within a congregation, if the children are still living at home in the family unit, that family unit, whether you are a senior citizen or a young up-and-coming single unattached, you are assigned, if you are a member of that parish, to a discipleship group. And you have to actively opt out. In other words, you don't just wait for people to volunteer for this. A part of being a member of the Holy Ecclesia Church is to be in a small group. And what are those groups? How are they shaped? First of all, either by geography, in your section of the metropolitan area, or an affinity group. And that is, could be healthcare professionals, could form an affinity discipleship group, since they have in common the challenges and opportunities and frustrations and joys of working within the healthcare industry. Or it could be other kinds of affinity groups or a geographic group. And what are their primary tasks? Number 1, to care and love for one another. Number 2, to discern and support each member's call to discipleship. It's the priesthood of all believers. It is your call, even a very senior citizen or a young confirmed teenager, to discern, what is God calling me to do? How can I imitate the life of Christ in my school or in my neighborhood or in my work setting or in my community where I'm working on issues like climate change or justice or the homeless? Each person, as a part of the membership of the Holy Universal Ecclesia, must, without exception, discern their call to discipleship. Even if a member is relatively homebound and sheltered, in most cases, they can pick up a phone and now virtually communicate and help other people. That could be discerning their mission. And the third and final component of a discipleship group is intercessory prayer for one another and for those outside the discipleship group. All right, now, we have the metropolitan area. We said we're going to sell off a lot of the facilities that are underused or costly to maintain. And what you see then is one possible metropolitan era, 2020 era ecclesia structure. Now, the third point that I would have is focus, focus, focus. Good realtors say a good property is location, location, location. Well, focus, focus, focus. And I think the primary focus is to go and make disciples. As disciples, we are operating as aliens in a foreign, secular, highly secular culture. And our task is to imitate the Christ, as in Thomas à Kempis's wonderful meditational book written in the 1300s, The Imitation of Christ. And that is by being the salt of the earth and the light of the world in the various areas of my discerned discipleship. Okay, now, as I've concluded each in this series, what would a prophet say to our church leaders of today? In the midst of the spring 2020 coronavirus pandemic, use that experience. Use it as the shaking of the foundations. God is shaking the foundations and calling us to reassess who we are as the Christian people of God in today's highly secular cultures. The second thing that I think a prophet, be it the prophet he or she, would say is, never again let Caesar or the political authorities finally determine when and how the people of God worship God and celebrate the risen Christ's presence in the Holy Eucharist. Yes, there may be prudent reasons why to have safety or distance or a limited number at any one celebration of worship, but never again, in my view, can we let the world encroach upon our agenda. Never again let Caesar close the churches of God. And my last thing that I think a prophet would say is be bold, be confident. The Holy Spirit will give its guidance and help as you face the issues of the 2020 Era Holy Ecclesia Church. But for now, this concludes the series of the 2020 Era Holy Ecclesia Universal Church's mission in the world and my agenda for the church. That's as I see it now. How do you see the church in our current society in this era? I'm John Piquel.